So Graham, I think perhaps it might be time to start before
Okay.
it starts to melt, and I hope people are logging in from somewhere sunny and enjoying this lovely weather. But Graham, thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'd like to invite anybody who's got specific questions for Graham to type them in the Q&A box at any point, and we'd be very happy to make this a live and an open conversation. And Graham, thank you for that. You know, we're keen that most people get most value from this conversation. So, but Graham, for everybody joining today, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, okay. Well, Sam, as you said, firstly, thanks very much for the introduction and the chance to speak today, and good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, as you mentioned, my name is Graham Mitchell, and I'm a business psychologist. I run an organisation called T2I, and as you say, we're running a Q&A, and I would imagine that if you're anything like most of the audiences that I deal with, then the first question is, what on earth is a business psychologist, and sort of what do they do? And it's an interesting point because I think it covers a multitude of sins depending on where people tend to come at it from. From my perspective, the umbrella answer I sort of give around what I do is that I use psychology to work with my clients to help them perform better. So some of that can be the commercial outcomes that they're looking to achieve. Some of it can be the cultural outcomes that they're looking to achieve. A lot of the time, it's a combination of the two. So it's what are you trying to achieve and how you're trying to achieve it. So we work together, but hopefully it's sort of focusing on what they're all about. And it tends to see me work at 3 levels. So sometimes that will mean interacting with people on a one-to-one level. So individual coaching or personal development, trying to work with individuals around their sort of mindset and motivation or development. A lot of it nowadays is around teams, where you've got leadership teams or maybe key project teams who have to work together collectively to deliver on strategic outcomes, and how can we get them working more effectively and keep them working more effectively. And then the final bit is that organisation-wide stuff. So whether it's big motivational frameworks, engagement, culture, what can we do that's creating that environment that's going to really, really help clients? And it's working at those levels really to, I suppose, to help them do 2 things, which is either sort of overcome the challenges that they're facing or achieve the objectives that they'd like to. And there's been a lot of that over the last few weeks. What's been nice is it's been both. Obviously, there have been conversations around the challenges that people face and how we overcome them. But right from the offset and increasingly, there are opportunities out there. There are objectives people want to achieve, and it's starting to shift in its focus as to how we do that. And and hopefully today will be an opportunity to sort of share some ideas and hear some ideas around how we can keep doing that really well, so that we're all being a bit more successful in terms of navigating what's going on and overcoming challenges and getting back to what we really want to do on the positive side as well.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Ben. And what we're hearing from our client companies is that they've been through the triage phase, and now they're trying to design a new world and trying to understand how do we thrive, and what can we expect a new norm to look like. So, you know, with that in mind, Graham, you know, what are you seeing? Where do you feel we're at in that change cycle at the moment?
Well, it's interesting you put it that way, because in answering that, I think it is probably useful to I suppose to walk you through what I think we have experienced and are experiencing from talking to organisations, because right from the offset, it's been, what's our response to this going to be? What's our response plan going to be? And as you'd expect, you talk to different organisations, you get slightly different versions, and sector to sector, again, there's little nuances that are relevant to them and the challenges that they'll face. But broadly speaking, I think it's sort of, in my mind, it's 4 stages. And I think the first stage was probably what I'd class as almost an observational stage in a way, because it unravelled so quickly and it was changing day to day, both on an economic front and a social front, and many other fronts as well. And almost at that stage, all we could do is almost assess and evaluate what's going on, what are the changes that are occurring, and what's that going to mean for us and our clients, and what we will do as a business. I think very, very swiftly after that, we went into what I would say is a consolidation phase, which is really about problem solving and planning. So given what we've seen going on around us and the judgments we've made off the back of that, what are the problems we need to solve internally? How do we get ourselves ready? What fires do we need to put out? How can we get our people to the places that they need to be? And then what plans can we start to put in place to how we move that forward? I think that brings us to the stage that I get a sense we're in now, which is what I would class as the recovery stage. So how do we put our response plans in place and start to operate again as a business and operate in a meaningful way to our clients? And how do we keep reviewing that as we go? Because things are still unfolding. There are differences every day. And we just need to make sure that things are they're either delivering as we hope they would do, in which case let's keep going, or if not, then how can we tweak them so that we do keep going on a recovery plan? And hopefully what that'll lead to is what I guess a re-engagement phase. So how do we get back in line with what we wanted to go on and do? So how do we get back to growth, which I think we all absolutely have to have in mind, and what are the lessons we can learn? And I don't just mean that at this kind of large scale, how will we deal with a pandemic again or a major incident if it came round? But I think that a lot of organisations will learn a lot of lessons about how they're far more capable than maybe they thought they were. There's a lot more flexibility. We could do things in lots of different ways. And actually that hopefully means we're better prepared, better set to deal with a lot going forward. So I think it's gone in those 4 stages. And I think you're right in terms of where we've gone through that triage stage and we're moving forward. And at each point, it's been that uncertainty of which way next. And because it's challenged on many fronts, be they operational or, how do we do what we do? Productivity, how do we do what we do in a meaningful way? What does that look like in terms of our clients? And from a cultural perspective, how do we keep our people safe? And I think each time it's been, okay, how do we do this? And the big challenge now I think people are starting to reconcile is okay, we're starting to ease restrictions, but we've all kind of got to a new norm that made us comfortable. What are we doing? Are we going to go to what we did before, or are we going to stay with what we've got? And I think that's because it's ambiguous, it can always make us feel a bit unsettled. And when we're unsettled, one of the things that it affects our mindset is we talk in very binary terms. So we either choose A or B rather than think, well, hang on a second, is there a balance here that's going to work well for us? And the challenge that people are facing in some of the areas I'm sure we'll cover today is how do we best strike that balance? So how do we become effective moving forward for what I would say would be the next normal, and then the new world when we eventually get to a more stable place. So that's what I'm hearing, and would I be surprised if we don't cover today?
Yeah, no, I think that's probably the $1 million question, Graham. The thing that we're being asked most, and I think some questions that have come through, is how do we optimise each phase of semi-lockdown or should a new world mean we all work at home all the time? Does it mean we should be Twitter and say you can work at home forever, or should we try and embrace the best of both? And I think the key question I'm asked most often, and I think you'd be interested in your views, is it feasible to be an ambitious, high growth business, which so many of our clients are, while at the same time working in a disparate model where teams aren't collaborating and aren't working together?
I break that down into two halves in a way, and I think the first point is you talk about is it feasible to be ambitious, and not only do I think it's feasible to be ambitious, I think it's absolutely essential that we are. And I did a session right back at the end of March when we were just going into lockdown individually and as businesses, and I'll show my age here. It was really, what can you take away from 2008 that might be useful to have in mind whilst we're going into this? And I came up with kind of a quick list of 5 things to consider. And the first one was stay ambitious as a business. And I think it's key on 2 levels. I think it's key on an organization level that we maintain the vision for our business because it brings meaning to what we're doing. So it is really hard work at the moment, but it's not just hard work day to day. We're doing all this for a reason. We're doing this because we're trying to get through the day-to-day so that at some stage we can go on and achieve all those things that we wanted to do. And that brings absolute meaning and motivation and context to what we're doing. So we've absolutely got to have those ambitions so that to whatever degree we can as a business, we're thriving rather than just surviving this, and we're carrying on moving forward. So I think that ambition's key at that level. I also think it's really important that then distills down to our individuals as well, to our people, and we'll probably talk about this a bit more later on, but just making sure that they've got their little ambitions and their goals that they're working to. Because if we're operating those in the right way, it gives them a real focus. What am I trying to achieve day to day? How do I focus my energy and my resources around that? What are the plans I can put in place to do that? And where I'm experiencing those successes, how does it feed back into the motivation to come back in and do it again tomorrow? So I think that the first half of that, I think it's absolutely key to stay ambitious. High performing, well, that might be something we all need to look at how we build back. But if you look at performance against proximity, I think there's we've got to sort of break it down around what did performance actually look like? What was it comprised of? And break it down into its component parts and say, okay, fine, how much of that performance that we had happened while we were in an office together, or how much of that performance was because we were in an office together? And the more you can break that down and think, well, actually what made us great wasn't the fact that we were sat next to each other, it was this, it was the way that we collaborated, it was the skills that we brought together, it was the culture that we had or the environment that we had, rather than just that physical proximity. We can start to think about, okay, so how do we stay high performing, whatever that might look like right now, in a fresh context? And it's, again, I think it's not easy. And what I should say at the start of this is sadly there's no one right answer that I can give to anybody with a lot of this. I think if there is, we'd have read it by now. It's about finding the best way forward for you, but it's by breaking things down into what good looked like before and what does it need to look like now.
Right. So, and I guess that comes down to leaders then, doesn't it, Graham? And the other really pressing issue that everyone seems to be looking for some direction on is, how do leaders need to change their style, the way they relate to their people? If we, we do move to a disparate or geographically dispersed way of working, what things do you think leaders need to be considering and changing?
Well, I suppose if you look at it, I suppose again that's a couple of points in a way, because there's a style as the sort of how we do things, and then there's the act of what we do. And I think you're absolutely right. I think leadership has such a huge part to play in this. But I think when you do work with leaders, the one thing you always try and say to them is be authentic. We are all different characters, and yes, we've all got slightly different shades of what we mean depending on the situations we find ourselves in. But whatever your style is, you've got to be authentic and you've got to be you. So I think with a lot of the how you are as a leader, it's not really a question of do I need to dramatically change my style. Just think about what that might look like now in terms of my actions so that I'm still effective as a leader. The one thing we've got now is there's no there's far less natural cues around at this moment in time. So as a leader, our ability to communicate to people or to see things that are coming back to us, etc., is limited. Life's a bit more transactional, it's a bit more deliberate and planned, and the naturally occurring, the unintentional isn't there. And we just maybe need to think about how that impacts on us in terms of our style, about when might I need to be a bit more planned in what I do, when might I need to be a bit more proactive in terms of how I talk to my people, because the off-the-cuff scenarios might not crop up. And I think that's the key thing with leaders is in terms of their style. I think the main thing is just to stay true to your style, but just understand what it might look like given the restrictions. And the big thing with remote working is the big restriction is it is more transactional than that general day-to-day, and you lose that, and you've got to try and think of ways to compensate for that.
So what sort of things would you suggest, Graham? Because I think some of the feedback I've heard about managers, people being led, is that they felt it's become too transactional. But as you say, if you're not seeing people, you don't have that opportunity to pick up the nuances in their mannerisms and how they're really feeling today. How do you compensate for that?
I think it's a really, really common challenge. And again, if we are in an office with people, we're leading people, we get so many cues coming in as to how things are doing that we almost that management information just flows in. We probably don't even see or acknowledge a lot of it, and all of a sudden we've lost it all. It's, the vast majority is gone. If we're not on a call to people, then we don't know what they're doing. And again, that ambiguity, that uncertainty breeds a bit of anxiety of, are they delivering? Are they okay? And what we can tend to do is, again, we can work in extremes. So you tend to find that most managers would either go to what they would class as a very micromanagement side of things, probably far more than they would do if they're seeing people day to day, and they're probably not comfortable with it, and their people aren't, but it's sort of short-term puts their mind at rest. Or they think, well, I can't really do everything, so I won't do anything in a way. I'll be very laid back in my management style, and in that way they don't feel like they're crowding them. And I think the key thing, whether you go to one extreme or another, whether you're very trusting or you might want to see people, is that is the word. It's all about trust. It's all about trust with our people, and it's about managing by expectation. rather than activity in a way. It's are people delivering what I would want them to deliver in a way that I would want them to deliver it. So there's a sort of values and a quality standard to it, as well as an action standard to it. And the key thing, therefore, is to make sure you set those expectations up front and agreed on as well. And it's just I used to have quite a few people remote working, so it's more something that I sort of developed in my own mind as a little useful checklist to go through. Is I use an acronym called CREATES. So CREATES, and what that actually stands for, and just in terms of setting those expectations, is the C to start with is just, are those objectives absolutely clear? Or, are we all really clear on what it is I need you to do, when we're going to do it by, the standards I want you to work to, etc. So they're all nailed on. The R then is, let's explore resources. Have you got everything you need in order to complete that task? Have you got the time? Have you got the additional people that you might need today? Have you got the technology? Sometimes have you got the authority if I'm asking you to manage other people? Have you got all those resources, hard and soft? The E is the engaged. So it's the why of all this. So why I'm asking you to do it. It may be that it's good for your development. It may be that I'm asking you to do something that not normally what you do. At the moment, we're all having to flex our roles a little bit, but you understand why I'm asking you and why it's good for the team and why it's good for the clients at the other end of this. A is around ability. So if I'm setting you a task to do, have you got the skills to do it on a technical side? And also, do you know how to apply them tactically? So actually, sometimes we'll have the skill set, but at the moment, we're all applying things in new ways or different environments. So it's quite good just to have a conversation around that. The T then is, what's their thought processes? Are they confident? If I'm honest with them, as I say, we don't get the visual cues. So chat to them. Are you confident? Anything you're nervous about with this? Tell me now and we can talk you through. E is external. So are they external at work? What else is in the in tray? Are there other things that might limit your time or your ability to do this? At the moment, what's external at home? People have a lot on their plate when they log in day to day. We're all challenged much more than we were usually. And is there anything that would be worthwhile discussing so I can help you with that? And the S, which is absolutely key, is supervision. What do you need from me? How are we going to work? Is it, I'll give you this now and we'll check in again next Friday. Do you want me to check in halfway through? Do you want the doors open sort of working relationship? But whatever it is, let's really explore and set those expectations now. And then let's live with them. Because I think trust is a two-way street. So if we're setting these expectations and I'm going to trust you to deliver, and it'll be easier for some than it is for others, I have to keep my side of the bargain as well. So I can't say, great, fine, I'll set you the task and I'll check with you next Friday and then give you a call tomorrow and say, why hasn't it been done? So I think it's important when we're dealing with that. It is tricky. It will be easier for some than others, but it's just about what are those clear expectations and managed by expectations, really, of what people need to deliver rather than the actions. So it's a bit more outcome and a little bit less process.
Right. So do you think we will be moving away from a presenteeism approach, Graham? I mean, we've operated flexible working as a business. We work with lots of really forward-thinking companies who've steered away from it. But do you think working from home is the end of presenteeism?
I'd like to think so, because again, at the end of the day, any organisation is judged on, what individual is judged on, is what you achieve. And your processes lead to your achievements. You can't doubt that. You have to do certain things in place to achieve them, but ultimately it's what you achieve. But I think the working patterns side of things is an interesting one at the moment, because if you look at from a well-being perspective around work, that we all take a lot more away from work than just paying rations, although they're obviously very important. And one of the things it brings us is a structure to our day. Now, some of us will really like the structure that we used to work to in the office, the times we arrived, the natural punctuation to the day, it suited me. So I will try and replicate that when I get home. Others might think, well, actually, I understood why I was doing that, because when other people were in, but there are different things that will suit me. So you might find that actually I feel I'm more productive between 6 and 8. So I'll get up early. I wouldn't have normally done it in the office, but I'll work then. So this is where it is that, okay, fine, so to what degree can I accommodate people's individual working patterns when they work at their best compared to what the collective working patterns are in a way? Because we'll all develop our rhythms a little bit around when we like to work, given domestic distractions, sometimes when we can work, homeschooling, etc. But the whole thing is to have some sort of structure And that structure has to be based around being effective. So it has to be, it can't just be, oh, I'll do it whenever. You have to make sure that you think, I know what I need to do, and I know when I'm going to do it, so I can give my little piece to the jigsaw. And then it really is that, okay, so how do we manage around that? So it's not necessarily that presenteeism from a point of view of when are you logged in, as much as let's be effective, let's deliver what we need to.
So the counter to that, Graham, is how do leaders ensure their teams don't burn out? Because I think, particularly in a tough economic cycle, some people will have a propensity to just want to work and work and work and work and work, and that can't be healthy. What would be your advice on ensuring your team aren't burning out?
I think there's a couple of, and it is a really, really good point to make, because funnily enough, there's two major challenges with people when they work from home, which is one, they might be the underproductivity, they find it difficult to engage with work. The second one is they overwork. They haven't got the natural cues around them that they haven't got somebody once their desk and inadvertently they take a 5-minute break while they just have a quick cup of coffee or a chat to somebody. They haven't got people leaving at lunchtime or the end of the day to sort of say it's okay to go home now. So I think a lot of this is agreeing with your people when they're going to work and when they're not going to work, and really sort of adhering that, because in the same way that the interactions are a lot more transactional, so is work. It's far more focused. So when we sit down to do something for an hour, we'll probably do it for an hour, and on average, depending on what the task is, etc., and individual characteristics, 45 minutes an hour is quite a concerted effort before we just take a little breather and come back to things. So I think it's really important to work with your people as well to say, how are you going to structure your day? When are you going to work? When are you going to stop? And make sure that they do. And I think alongside that, just doing the general check-in about their well-being, and coming back to the leadership style before, and don't necessarily think about your style, think about your actions. When we're in an office, we can see people. We can take cues around, a couple of days now, I just want to ask them in a quiet moment, are they okay? Because I've just seen things that tell me that maybe they're not. We don't get that when we're working from home. Everybody puts on their best face when they do the Zoom meetings. So it's worthwhile just making that we make a conscious effort to, how are you? What sort of hours are you working? You're being productive. You're doing all you need to. Is it working for you in everything that it needs to, as well as working for the organisation? And make sure we're striking that balance.
Thank you. And Graham, coming back to your creates model, you talked about making sure the person you're working with has got the skills. Do you think that in a working from home model, knowledge transfer becomes harder? We had a particular question about how grads will, if we're all working from home, how will a graduate new to the workplace sort of become enmeshed? What are your thoughts about knowledge transfer, learning, development?
Yeah, I think again, the challenge with knowledge transfer is sorry to use the same word again, it becomes very transactional, it's very deliberate, it's very planned, or it runs the risk of being that. And so it'll probably be beneficial in some senses, because we will think we need to make sure we're getting learning and development across, so we'll set aside time to do it. But we lose the naturally occurring and the unintentional. We don't spark off something that we sort of half hear around the office. And that's a lot of the time, that's what creativity is. It's hearing what other people are doing and almost consciously or subconsciously thinking, well, what would I do in that situation? Or how would I do that? And that's where, sometimes the creative seeds come from. So it's really, it is a challenge. There's no two ways about it, because we will miss those informal or unintentional interactions. So there's a little bit around, okay, so how can we be, how can we put aside the formal times for knowledge transfer, but obviously in a bizarre way of, should we remember to be more spontaneous, how can we put aside time to just try and create informal interaction, or ways in which we'll do it. So I know some organisations have almost conversational chatter boxes, that they just plug, almost like we chit chat around the office, and it's striking the balance there between I suppose enough communication, but not too much for people, in a way that it doesn't again get lost amongst the volume. But there's ideas around that. Organisations used to run things called random coffee trials, where basically you just gave over 20 minutes once a week to have a conversation with somebody else from around the business. Could be anywhere around the business, just talking about what you're both up to, so that actually you start to facilitate different. Oh, right, fine. You step outside your group, you step outside your internal network in a way. So it's really just how we would facilitate that, both on a formal sense where there is learning and development and we need to pass on certain things, and how we're going to do that, but how can we best compensate for the informal interactions that we're not seeing at the moment and that are really, really valuable? Some of the best ideas, that's how they come about.
So would you say, Graham, it's important for businesses to sort of lock out time for those informal conversations? I was interviewing one of our cybersecurity clients earlier in the year, and he cyber developers are always super busy, never have time, and he used to mandate a half day every single month for a special project, and you could work on any project as long as it wasn't directly related to your job across the company. And they had some amazing results from that.
Yeah.
Some black hat talks and 2 patents, but for him it was about forcing the time into people's calendars and giving them the freedom. Is that what you think leaders need to be doing right now? So it's okay to have a coffee chat, to have a brainstorm on something that might go nowhere, or it might just not be something useful.
Yeah, I think it is, because when we look at a little bit of it comes back to what I was saying before about what the workplace gives us, and it gives us a structure, it gives us a sense of purpose, but it does give us social interaction as well, and some of that social interaction is formal or informal or sort of sat between the two. And I think the key thing is to look at that and say, okay, from when we were interacting with people, what were the good bits? What were the really good and useful bits? And sometimes it is just, I used to really enjoy that cup of coffee I'd have with somebody who's a colleague, but also they're a friend at the same time. So we might talk a bit about work, but actually it was just a nice break from what I'm doing. There'll be ones where actually we were half talking about work, it was a very useful spark to do, and there were very formal interactions as well. And it's really about thinking that they were all probably valuable. So how do we weave them back into our current way of working, given that we're having to be a bit more conscious about what we do, we're having to make that call or schedule that appointment, but don't undervalue the informal stuff. As I say, it's often if creativity was a big collective capability for you, if it was part of what made you great, find the space to do it, find the environment to do it. So whatever, we were talking about teams, and I think, with how we collaborate as teams, it's really important to know what were the capabilities that made us really useful as a collective, and what were the processes that used to do it, so that we really kind of try and blend the two together and say, how do we get that back into what we do, given it's not going to be as naturally occurring as it might have been in an office environment.
And do you think that's feasible on a long-term basis remotely, Graham? Or do you think the human psyche, the need for social connections, will mean that it remains critical that people do come together?
I think it would long term. It will be a challenge, because we're all different. We all have different personalities and profiles, and we all have kind of different, therefore, in personal needs in a way, and that side of things. So some of us are very extrovert, gregarious, outgoing. There's a real need for social interaction and stimulation, and the shift to working at home might have been a real challenge for people like that. Some of the quieter, more introvert people amongst us, actually, it was a more comfortable shift, because we liked having people around us, but we were quite self-contained in a way. But what you tend to find is that whether you liked it a lot or a little, you liked it, that you needed it to a degree. So I think longer term, it will be that question of, I think we'd all miss it a bit in a way. So it's about, with all these things, we talked at the start about how we balance things, that we're either completely remote or completely in the office. I think it's a question of, how do we balance things? Because there will be value in both ends in a way, and it's about what we're doing as a general principle of what we're doing day to day. So I think longer term, people would start to miss it, in the same way as we all kind of value every now and then those days working from home, just to clear the head and have a bit of peace and quiet. But I think it's something that we can, as I say, we can compensate for by the way that we operate remotely. It means that we can still get the social interaction. We just can't get the complete face-to-face.
So Graham, a question here, and for me this relates, I understand the question, because we try and get our whole company together on Zoom, and we're 25 odd people all on Zoom at once, and it can get a bit chaotic. And the question is, do you have any tips for managing bigger Zoom meetings, especially regarding the chat box becoming a distraction? I don't know if that's a technical thing about switching it off, but any thoughts about engaging big groups of people on Zoom?
it's tricky. It really is. I mean, I suppose managing the big conversations isn't. There are what there are out there. What I'd probably say is there are some real experts out there who are, know this very well. And there's a little bit around how you would come across as a leader in Zoom conversations, how you can manage those big meetings, etc. Whether they're formal or informal, social ones. I think the key thing, what's quite useful from a team perspective or organisational perspective, and what a lot of them is they've sort of created their charter in a way. So how do we operate in those situations? So what's almost a Zoom meeting etiquette in terms of how we would function? And actually, if we're looking at that, could we, if we think about it, how often time as an organisation do we get together completely as a whole and not then break down into separate conversations? So sometimes there is a formal address, but actually then we probably end up talking in 6s and 7s and doing it. So again, it's how we would replicate what we do normally. And there are some really good people out there who've got ideas around this. But again, normally, if we're there as a whole, we'd be listening to one person and then we'd break into smaller groups in a way. But I think whatever it is, it's quite useful, and it's a good blueprint for other things, just to sort of engage your people and say, right, and how do we want to manage things so that actually people find them enjoyable rather than slightly testing, and what's our way of doing it? And let's agree to our etiquette or our charter of how we'll deal with meetings, be they team or bigger.
Thank you for that. And I know when we first went into lockdown, we tried an all-company meeting every day, and it was chaos.
Yeah.
I think it's about learning what works for you, doesn't it? And not being afraid to flex and change really quickly. So I think you've touched on this quite a bit, but I think one of the things I have a huge fear of personally, actually, is sort of loss of culture.
Yeah.
I think Expand has a very, very strong culture, and I think so many of our clients looking to hire they see their ethos, their purpose, and their culture as differentiators when they're looking to hire. Do you think how do we protect it, and or do you think we just need to accept it will evolve?
Well, I think it's something to take ownership of. Really, I think organisations' culture is a really, really valuable tool for organisations at this moment in time. But it will take work, and there are many convoluted descriptions. I always go with the simple one, which is your culture is the way you do things around here. It's just what it's just what we'd expect of ourselves. I might not know the situation someone's going into, but knowing our culture, I know exactly how they'd operate. It could be with clients, it could be whatever. And that's great. So it's a good short description. But when we're working with people's culture, we'll try and think, okay, so how does that come to life a little bit? And it is always built around a central ethos. So what's that central principle? What's your organisation all about? And then it's really, with that in mind, how would that come to the surface in certain ways? So if your organisation is all about relationships, it's about that we trade off big relationships, etc. Think about what that might look like in terms of, well, what would we want people to be saying about us right now? How can we act in a way, and how can we act in a way that delivers that? So whether it's our people or our customers, what would we want people to be saying about us? What are the sort of routines that will be there? What would people expect to be happening? So as you said before, if we're quite a social organisation, and we always used to have the Friday afternoon, let's just get the fridge open and have a couple of drinks and just be with people. Well, we can't do it in the office, but people would still expect that to happen because that's just what we're all about. So what's our virtual version of that? What little symbols are there, either verbal or actually tangible, that just are completely us? And how do they translate to a virtual setting? So if we are, we've got things up on the wall that tend to be our values, why don't they flash up on a screensaver now so that they're coming through? They're still visible. They're still things that are really important to us. What's our structure? How do we, both formally and informally? And what are the relationships around that? And how do we keep that going in a virtual format? Because we're not bumping into each other at the water cooler, but they're still really important moments. So how do we bring that to life? How do we manage ourselves? So with our rewards or our regulations, are we quite formal or informal? And given we need to be a bit more deliberate about what we do, how do we bring it to life? And then decision-making or power, how do we tend to make decisions? Who makes decisions? Is it tend to come from a central source that disseminated out? Is it much more a democratic thing? And how do we keep all that going? And it really is, you use the word evolve, and I think it is that, but I think it's about, rather than letting it evolve, it's taking ownership and thinking, well, what does all that look like? What would people expect from our organisation, given we're all about this? What would people expect in those sort of key areas in a way? And engage with your people around it. You know, everybody's got one share in culture in a way. So it's really important to engage with the people and say, okay, well, if we're staying true to our culture and ethos, what's that going to look like given the changes that we've had to absorb? And actually almost translate our culture into that so it stays how we would want it to, rather than hopefully thinking it will find its way there.
Thank you, Claire. And what about with the outside world? I have a question here about sort of in a sales or account management environment. You know, what do you think the new world needs to look like in terms of external outward communication? Okay,
I mentioned earlier on that I'd done a session back that was a sort of a lessons learned from 2008, and another one which might be key here, might be what the person's looking for, is that the key thing that we're looking at now is that I certainly haven't come across a sector, if there is one, where this hasn't really hit everybody, where everybody is going to be starting from a lower base. And so I think that there'll be a lot of collaboration and codependency in terms of how we build back out of this. And I think therefore that what you tend to find is that people will spend, they'll invest, they'll just be very careful on what they invest in and who they invest with. And it makes it very, very relationship driven in what you do. And I think the key then is that however you're doing that, try and go for what I would class as win-win relationships. So when you're doing all this, understand that actually it is better for us all if we all build back together, because there's a better economy and we all want to be the best in really buoyant times, rather than just because we've managed to scramble up a bit quicker than someone else. So let's help people build back. So my first thing is make your interactions relationship driven. Be prepared to give to get. And do that. And I think if you're looking at that on a very practical level, wherever you can, try and have this sort of face-to-face interaction. You know, it just gives you more to go at. You know, I think the stories they tell us, or the reports they say, 10% is what we say, and then the rest of it's all the visual and the verbal and the body language. We go down the phones, we lose a lot of that. So if we can get people in this sort of forum where you can really come across as a person and build that relationship, I think that's going to be quite key to what you do, and look at it long term, build back with people, so that actually, do I want a quick win today, or do I want something that I'm going to build a working relationship with them, that it means that I'm going to really work with them moving forward. So it's key to sort of think who are the people we want to build those relationships with, and they might not always be the immediate ones, but start talking to them now, because everybody will want to knock on their door in 18 months time when they're back on board. But if you've done it 18 months ago, they know your relationship's genuine rather than just an immediate gain one. So it's most around that relationship piece, I think, for me is the real kind of core to it all.
And I think we've all become a lot more comfortable on Zoom than we were maybe 3 months ago, haven't we?
Yes, yeah, even me.
I was reflecting the other day, we bought desktop computers with cameras in the monitors 5 years ago, with the intention that everything would be video, and it's only really been the last 3 months that everyone's got on board with it. So.
Yeah. But that is a great example about the opportunities that come out of this as well, because I think that with that mindset, we can sort of think if we can't do everything the way we used to, let's not do it at all, and that can all of a sudden we stand still. Or if we can't do it exactly how we used to, then are we going to do it? And I think it has brought about a great deal of creativity, and it's hopefully in a nice and positive way. It's opened people's minds around changing habits. And actually not just doing things because that's the way we've always done it, but we can see new ways of doing things. And this is what I mean about lessons learned in a way. And it will be interesting moving forward for a whole host of reasons, from cost to the environment to whatever, to see the new patterns that we drop back into when we come out of this. Because I think we're all a lot more comfortable. I think everybody's comfort zone has probably expanded over the last couple of months in a way. So we've probably surprised ourselves. We're going to hang on to that.
I think we've probably, I certainly have been hugely impressed with the resilience of so many people, and seeing businesses pivot, seeing individuals adapt. I think that the fact that as human beings we're hugely resilient has been quite remarkable.
Yeah, and that's why I come back to that original point about staying ambitious, because what we do with goals is with goals it's often it's not the having the goal, it's the setting the goal, it's the process we go through. So where are we trying to get to? Why are we trying to get there? What's that going to rely on? How do we operate in those things? It does give us a bit more focus. And at the moment, time and resources are so scarce. We really want to work smart as well as hard. But it also builds in that resilience. So actually, we're going to get knockbacks. It's going to be challenging. But I know the direction I'm trying to head in, and I know why we're trying to get there, because we will go on and achieve these great things. It's not just a day-to-day task. It's it's that classic thing. I understand we're still trying to build cathedrals. We're not just laying bricks here. There's an extra meaning to this. And I think that's why it's important to stay ambitious, because it helps to build and replenish that resilience as well. I know why I'm doing this. I know, resilience is all about how do I get to a goal despite knockbacks. And I think if I know what that goal is and I know why it's important to me and to those around me, that's going to fuel that resilience and help me overcome those challenges, because they're going to be there. Let's be honest, they're going to be there.
Yeah. Graham, I think one last question for the moment. A question here about, building relationships on camera. Would you recommend having a slide deck involved, or keeping it sort of, face to face like we're doing right now?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I think with a lot of what we're doing at the moment, it's normal rules apply, or normal principles apply. How do you translate it through? So some of it will be, think about your audience, really. If you think about your audience, are they somebody who typically you would speak to in quite a formal way? They will appreciate that formal. I do a lot of work with lawyers, for example, and as on the whole, they appreciate that more formal bullet point interaction in a way. So it's really a question of, I'll still try and do that, but in a way that still works, given we're online. So rather than it be hard and fast, it's just what's the sort of virtual version of what would have worked in person in a way. So if it maybe is the more conversational, let's keep it conversational. If it maybe is something a bit more formal, then let's do that. The great thing now is by sharing screens and stopping, we can go from conversational to more formal, sharing resources relatively easily, he said, probably overstating his Zoom knowledge. So I think it's really a question of, in the same way as when we were presenting to an audience, we'd always think, well, what's my style and what's their style, and how do I best blend the two? It's really that. So I'm still being authentic to me. I still think I'm speaking to them in a way that they would want to receive information, but I'm taking into account the circumstances we're all operating in at the moment.
Thank you, Graham. Graham, thank you so much. As ever, your insights are fascinating. I'd love to sit and chat to you all day, but I think we're nearly out of time. Thank you for everybody who joined us today. Graham is easily contactable via LinkedIn or through the website t2i.com.
Yeah, t-2i.com.
Indeed. And Graham, thank you very much. It's undoubtedly unprecedented, challenging, all those words that we've had a million times in the last 3 months. But let's all be confident we're on the road to recovery, and hopefully we can start looking forward to redesigning our organisations and making the best of all of this. So thank you.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. It's nice to be able to interact with everybody, get a sense of what's going on. And it is one of those, as I say, there's been massive collaboration and codependency in terms of how we work back. So I think the opportunity to share ideas and help everybody do that, it's always nice to do.
Awesome. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thanks very much.
Bye now.